The bitter wind howled down the empty main street as Emma clutched her threadbare shawl, following her stepbrother Caleb toward the warm glow of the saloon. She had no idea why he'd ordered her to come along, only that his voice had carried that dangerous, mocking edge she'd learned to fear. Her stepmother had pressed her lips together tightly when Emma left, as if holding back a cruel laugh. Caleb pushed open the saloon door, and a wave of smoke, heat, and drunken laughter washed over her. Emma froze in the doorway, her wide eyes darting over the rough men hunched around tables, the stink of whiskey making her stomach twist. "Why are we here?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Caleb didn't answer. He marched her straight to the back table where a thick-set gambler with a gold tooth and a snake tattoo on his neck leaned back in his chair, grinning. "Well now," the gambler drawled, "didn't think you'd have the guts to pay up." Caleb forced a laugh, though his hands shook. "I told you I'd settle the debt, Silas. She's yours now." Emma's world tilted. "What?" she gasped, turning to Caleb in horror, but he wouldn't meet her eyes. Silas stood, towering over her, and gripped her chin with rough fingers. "Not much meat on her bones," he sneered. "But she'll do for the kitchen or whatever else I feel like." The men around the table burst into cruel laughter as Emma struggled, her breath coming in ragged sobs. Across the room, a lone cowboy looked up from his drink. Elias Boone had been passing through town, minding his own business, but the sight of the terrified young woman being treated like a piece of property ignited a slow, cold fury in his chest. He rose to his full height, his storm-gray eyes like steel as he crossed the room. "Let her go," he said, his voice calm but carrying a dangerous edge. Silas sneered at him. "Stay out of this, stranger. Caleb here owes me more than he can count. This girl is my payment." Emma shook her head frantically, tears streaming down her face. "Please," she begged, "don't let them take me." Elias reached into his coat and pulled out a single silver dollar, the last coin he owned. He slammed it on the table so hard it rattled the bottles. "There's your payment," he said coldly. "She's leaving with me." The room went silent. Silas blinked in shock, then burst into a harsh laugh. "1 measly dollar? That's an insult." Elias leaned closer, his voice low and lethal. "Take it or take a bullet. Your choice." The threat hung heavy in the smoky air. Silas's smile faltered as he saw the deadly certainty in Elias's eyes. Slowly, with a snarl, he snatched up the coin. "Fine," he spat, "but you just made yourself an enemy you'll regret." Elias ignored him and turned to Emma, wrapping his coat around her trembling shoulders. "You're safe now," he murmured. She stumbled after him, her mind reeling, barely believing what had just happened. As they stepped into the freezing night, Caleb lunged forward. "You fool!" he shouted. "Do you know what you've done? Silas will come for you, for both of you." Elias swung back into the saddle, pulling Emma up behind him. "Let him come," he said, his voice like thunder. With a sharp kick, his horse bolted into the darkness, leaving the saloon behind. Emma buried her face against Elias's back, sobbing, while behind them Silas's roar of fury carried on the wind. Somewhere deep inside, she felt a fragile spark of hope. A stranger had spent his very last dollar to save her, but she knew this was only the beginning of a fight for her freedom that would test them both. The icy wind cut through Emma's thin shawl as Elias's horse thundered down the frozen trail, her arms locked tightly around his waist, her sobs muffled against his coat while her mind reeled from the betrayal she'd just endured. Behind them, the glow of the saloon lights faded into darkness, but the echo of Silas's furious roar seemed to chase them through the night. Elias didn't speak until they were miles from town, his storm-gray eyes scanning the horizon for danger as he finally slowed the horse to a trot. "We need to keep moving," he said, his voice deep and steady. "But you should know what's coming. Silas isn't the kind of man to let this go." Emma shivered violently, both from cold and terror. Why would Caleb do this?" she whispered, her throat raw. "He's my family." Elias's jaw tightened. "Men like him don't see you as family. To them, you're just leverage." Emma's chest heaved as the truth sank in. "He sold me like I was nothing," she choked out, tears freezing on her cheeks. Elias glanced back at her, his expression softening just slightly. "You're not nothing," he said firmly. "I didn't pay to own you, Emma. I paid to give you a choice." His words struck her like a lifeline thrown into dark water. But fear quickly drowned it. "Silas will come after you," she said, panic rising. "He'll kill you for humiliating him." Elias gave a grim half-smile. "He can try." As dawn painted the sky in pale streaks of gold, Elias guided the horse into a secluded canyon where his small cabin sat hidden among towering pines. He dismounted and helped Emma down, his hands gentle but sure. Inside, the cabin was sparse but warm, the crackling fire casting flickering light over rough-hewn walls. Emma sank into a chair, trembling, as Elias brewed coffee and laid out a simple meal. "Eat," he ordered softly. "You need your strength." She obeyed, though every bite felt heavy in her throat. When she finally found her voice, it came out in a whisper. "Why did you do it? You don't even know me." Elias leaned against the table, his gaze distant. "Once," he said slowly, "I stood by and did nothing while someone I cared about was hurt. I swore I'd never make that mistake again." Emma studied him, sensing a story he wasn't ready to share. Before she could ask, a distant sound shattered the quiet, the faint, rhythmic thud of hooves. Elias's head snapped up, every muscle going taut. He crossed the room in 3 strides, snuffed out the lantern, and grabbed his rifle. "They're here already?" Emma gasped, her heart slamming in her chest. Elias motioned her to the back room. "Stay low. Don't make a sound." She scrambled to obey, crouching behind stacked crates as shadows moved outside the frosted window. Harsh voices carried through the thin walls, Silas's among them. "Boone!" he bellowed. "Come out now, or we'll burn this shack to the ground." Emma clapped a hand over her mouth to stifle a cry. Elias stood tall in the darkness, rifle steady, his storm-gray eyes burning like twin coals. "I'm not the one hiding," he muttered under his breath. Then, louder, his voice a calm thunder. "You want her, Silas? You'll have to ride through me." Silence followed, thick and heavy, and Emma realized with a shudder that Elias Boone wasn't just a man who had saved her. He was about to become the only shield standing between her and a world determined to destroy her. The night outside the cabin was alive with the sound of horses and the cruel laughter of Silas's men as they circled like vultures, their torches flickering in the wind and casting monstrous shadows through the frosted windows. Emma's entire body trembled as she crouched behind the crates in the back room, her nails digging into the rough wood while her heart hammered so loudly she feared they would hear it. Elias stood like a wall of iron in the center of the room, his rifle steady, his breath slow and controlled despite the danger closing in. Silas's voice boomed again, dripping with malice. "Boone, you made a fool out of me in front of half the town, and I don't take kindly to being humiliated. Hand over the girl, and maybe I'll let you live long enough to regret it." Elias's jaw clenched, his storm-gray eyes narrowing as he shouted back, "You'll get her over my dead body, and not before." A ripple of angry shouts followed, then a sudden sharp silence that was far more terrifying than noise. Emma bit back a sob, her mind racing with images of what Silas had planned for her if Elias lost this fight. Elias moved to the window with the quiet precision of a predator, peeking through a gap in the shutters. There were at least 6 men. Maybe more, all armed and ready to burn the cabin to the ground. He exhaled slowly, then turned toward Emma, his voice low but steady. "If they break through, you run out the back and head for the creek. Don't stop. Don't look back." Emma's eyes widened in horror. "I won't leave you," she whispered fiercely. "You saved me. I won't just run away while you fight alone." Elias's expression softened for the briefest moment, but his tone left no room for argument. "If you stay, you die. Go." Before Emma could protest further, a gunshot cracked the night, shattering the window and spraying splinters across the room. Elias dove to the side, rolled, and returned fire with deadly accuracy, dropping one of Silas's men in the snow. Chaos erupted as torches flew through the air, igniting the dry pine-wood walls. The cabin began to fill with thick, choking smoke, flames licking hungrily at the ceiling beams. Emma screamed as a shadow loomed in the doorway, a hulking outlaw swinging a club. Elias tackled him with a roar, the 2 men crashing to the floor in a brutal struggle. Emma grabbed a fallen pistol with shaking hands, her breath coming in ragged gasps. For a moment she froze, terror rooting her to the spot. Then Elias's desperate voice cut through the haze. "Emma, now!" With a cry. She fired, the shot deafening in the small room. The outlaw collapsed, and Elias scrambled to his feet, grabbing her arm. "We're leaving," he growled. He kicked open the back door, smoke billowing around them, and dragged her into the freezing night. Behind them, Silas shouted orders, his voice full of rage. Bullets tore through the trees as Elias and Emma stumbled toward the creek, their breath pluming in the cold air. "Keep running!" Elias barked, pushing her ahead of him as snow crunched beneath their boots. Emma's lungs burned, tears freezing on her cheeks, but she didn't dare stop. As the roar of the burning cabin faded, she realized with bone-deep certainty that there would be no turning back now. Silas would hunt them to the ends of the earth, and their only hope of survival lay in Elias's unbreakable will to fight for her freedom. The creek bed stretched before them like a black ribbon beneath the pale light of the moon, its frozen surface slick and treacherous, the surrounding pines whispering in the icy wind as Elias pushed Emma ahead, his breath coming in harsh bursts, his storm-gray eyes scanning for movement in the darkness. Behind them, Silas's furious voice carried through the trees, followed by the pounding of hooves and the sharp clatter of rifle bolts being readied. Emma stumbled, her legs weak from exhaustion, but Elias caught her before she fell, his grip strong and steady. "Keep going," he urged, his voice low but commanding. "We can't let them pin us here!" Emma's chest burned, each breath like fire in her throat. "Why won't they stop?" she gasped. "You gave him money. You gave me my freedom. Why isn't that enough?" Elias's jaw tightened, his voice dark with anger. "Because men like Silas don't see people. They see property, power, control. You standing free makes him look weak, and men like that would rather burn the world than be shamed." Emma's heart twisted at his words, a cold realization settling deep in her bones. A branch snapped ahead of them, and Elias halted instantly, pulling Emma behind him as his rifle swung toward the sound. 3 riders emerged from the shadows, their torches casting a hellish glow across the snow, smoke curling from the barrels of their guns. "There they are," one shouted. Elias shoved Emma toward a fallen log. "Stay down!" he barked, then dropped to one knee and fired. The first rider toppled from his saddle with a strangled cry, but the others returned fire, bullets whining through the air as splinters and ice exploded around them. Emma crouched low, covering her head, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear Elias's shouts. He moved with deadly precision, his silhouette framed by the torchlight. A lone figure holding back the darkness. One outlaw broke away, circling toward Emma's hiding place. She saw his shadow looming and froze, terror locking her in place, until Elias's roar shattered the night. "Emma, down!" She dove flat as Elias's shot rang out, the outlaw pitching forward into the snow with a sickening thud. The last rider wheeled his horse and fled, his panicked cries echoing through the trees. Elias sprinted to Emma, hauling her to her feet. "We have to move before more come," he said, his voice ragged. Emma clung to him, shaking violently. "I can't," she sobbed. "I'm too tired, Elias." His gaze softened for a heartbeat, then hardened with resolve. "Yes, you can. Because if we stop now, Silas wins." He lifted her into his arms, as if she weighed nothing, and ran along the creek, his boots pounding the ice. Behind them, the forest erupted with angry voices as Silas himself arrived, his rage filling the night like a storm. "Find them!" he bellowed. "I want Boone's head, and I want that girl alive!" Elias didn't slow until the cabin was a distant glow on the horizon. Finally, he ducked into a narrow ravine where the trees grew thick and tangled. Setting Emma down gently, he crouched beside her, listening to the pursuit fade into the distance. "They'll keep coming," Emma whispered, her voice hoarse. Elias nodded grimly. "Then we'll make our stand on our terms." In that moment, Emma realized Elias wasn't just fighting to save her life. He was fighting to give her something she'd never had before. The right to choose her own future, no matter how much blood it cost them both. The ravine was silent except for Emma's ragged breathing and the distant echo of Silas's men crashing through the trees, their shouts growing faint as they split up to search in different directions. Elias crouched low beside her, his storm-gray eyes scanning the darkness, his rifle resting across his knees while every muscle in his body hummed with tension. Emma huddled against a boulder, her thin shawl no match for the biting cold, her mind whirling with fear and exhaustion. "We can't keep running like this," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They'll find us no matter where we hide." Elias turned to her, his expression hard but calm. "You're right. That's why we're not running anymore." She blinked at him in confusion, not understanding, until he rose and pointed toward a cluster of jagged rocks at the ravine's edge. "There's an old hunting cabin up there," he explained. "Half rotten and forgotten. We can use it as a trap." Emma's stomach twisted. "A trap? Elias, there are so many of them." He crouched beside her again, his hand firm on her trembling shoulder. "Numbers don't matter if we control the ground. Silas thinks he's hunting us. It's time we turn the tables." His voice carried such fierce certainty that for a moment Emma almost believed they could win. By dawn, they reached the abandoned cabin, its sagging roof and broken shutters hidden beneath heavy drifts of snow. Elias worked quickly, setting snares, scattering brush to conceal tracks, and rigging the entrance with ropes and weighted beams. Emma tried to help, though her hands shook so badly she kept dropping the tools he gave her. Finally, Elias took her hands in his rough, warm ones and held them steady. "Breathe," he told her softly. "Fear will get you killed faster than a bullet. Stay focused on what matters. You." Emma swallowed hard and nodded, clinging to his calm strength. As the sun rose higher, Elias positioned her near a back window with a small pistol. "You don't shoot unless they break through," he instructed. "If it comes to that, you aim low and don't hesitate." Emma's lip trembled. "What if I miss?" Elias's storm-gray eyes met hers, steady and unyielding. "Then you try again, and know that I'll be there between you and them until my last breath." The first signs of trouble came with the caw of startled crows. Elias stiffened, motioning for silence as the faint sound of hooves drifted through the cold morning air. Emma's heart pounded so loudly, she was certain the men outside could hear it. Through a crack in the wall, Elias watched as Silas rode into view at the head of nearly a dozen armed riders, their faces twisted with rage and anticipation. Silas dismounted, his snake-like smile spreading as he surveyed the cabin. "Boone," he called mockingly, "you can't hide forever. Hand over the girl, and maybe I'll let you crawl away." Elias's voice thundered back, calm and defiant. "Come and take her, Silas, if you've got the guts." The outlaws roared with laughter, then surged forward. The first man through the door triggered Elias's trap, a heavy beam swinging down to knock him senseless. Gunfire exploded, deafening in the small space. Emma clapped her hands over her ears, terror freezing her as Elias moved like a whirlwind, firing with deadly precision. Two men fell before they could even return fire, their bodies crumpling in the snow. Silas shouted orders, his face contorted with fury. Outside, more riders circled, preparing to set the cabin ablaze. Emma's scream tore through the chaos as a torch smashed through the window, flames licking hungrily at the walls. Elias grabbed her, his voice fierce over the roar of the fire. "This is it, Emma. We hold here, or we die trying." Flames erupted across the cabin walls, devouring the dry pine wood as smoke filled the small space, choking Emma and Elias, while the deafening roar of gunfire shook the air. Emma coughed violently, her eyes stinging as tears streamed down her soot-covered face, the pistol clutched in her trembling hands as Elias fired through the shattered window with deadly precision, each shot dropping a man before he could reach the door. Outside, Silas's furious voice rose above the chaos, shouting orders to surround the cabin and burn them alive. "Smoke them out!" he bellowed, his laughter cruel and wild. "Boone can't save her now." Emma's heart pounded as panic clawed at her chest. "Elias, we're trapped!" she screamed, coughing as embers rained down from the ceiling. Elias grabbed her arm and spun her towards the back window, his storm-gray eyes blazing with determination even as sweat and soot streaked his face. "Listen to me," he roared over the crackle of the flames. "When I say run, you run and you don't look back. Head for the creek and keep going until you hit the ridge. Jonah's place is just beyond it. You'll be safe there." Emma shook her head violently, terror and desperation twisting her voice. "I'm not leaving you. If you stay, they'll kill you." Elias cupped her face in his calloused hands, forcing her to meet his steady gaze. "If they take you, everything I've done means nothing," he said fiercely. "Please, Emma, trust me." Before she could respond, the door burst inward with a crash, and two of Silas's men charged through the smoke. Elias moved like lightning, shooting one point blank while tackling the other to the ground. The rifle clattered away as they grappled, fists and boots flying. Emma screamed as the outlaw's knife flashed in the firelight, plunging toward Elias's chest. Without thinking, she raised the pistol with both shaking hands and fired. The outlaw collapsed beside Elias, his lifeless eyes staring blankly at the smoke-choked rafters. Emma stood frozen, the pistol dropping from her numb fingers, as Elias staggered to his feet, chest heaving. "You saved me," he gasped, grabbing her trembling hand. "Now we move." He kicked open the back window, shoving Emma through just as another torch smashed inside, igniting the last intact wall. Emma fell into the snow, the icy cold shocking her lungs as she scrambled to her feet. Elias climbed out after her, blood dripping from a cut above his brow, and pulled her towards the trees. Behind them, the cabin roared like a living beast, its flames lighting the night sky as Silas cursed and screamed orders. Bullets whined past them, splintering tree trunks, but Elias didn't slow, his powerful strides carrying Emma deeper into the forest. They reached the frozen creek just as Silas and his remaining men burst through the smoke behind them, their torches glowing like demon eyes. Elias spun, dropping to one knee and firing in quick succession, his shots forcing the outlaws to scatter for cover. "Run, Emma!" he shouted. "Don't stop, no matter what you hear!" Emma hesitated, tears blurring her vision, then turned and ran, her breath coming in ragged sobs as snow stung her face. Behind her, she heard Elias's rifle barking, Silas's enraged screams, and the clash of men fighting to the death. Emma stumbled over the ice, terror and grief threatening to consume her, but she forced herself onward, clinging to Elias's last command. She didn't dare look back, because she knew that if she saw him fall, she would never find the strength to keep going. Emma's lungs burned as she ran through the snow, her feet slipping on the frozen creek bed while branches clawed at her face and arms. But she didn't dare slow down, not when Elias's last command echoed in her ears like a desperate prayer. Behind her, the roar of battle faded into the distance, replaced by the eerie quiet of the winter forest. But she could still hear Silas's enraged voice carrying on the wind, vowing to hunt her down and make her pay for defying him. Emma stumbled to her knees, sobbing, torn between going back to help Elias and obeying his command to keep running. She pressed her trembling hands to her mouth, trying to silence her cries, when suddenly a shadow loomed over her. Jonah, Elias's old friend, emerged from the darkness, his weathered face etched with concern and urgency. "Emma," he hissed, hauling her to her feet. "Where's Boone?" Emma's eyes filled with tears as she choked out, He stayed behind to fight them. We have to go back, Jonah. They'll kill him." Jonah's grip tightened on her arms, his voice rough but steady. Elias knew what he was doing. If we go back now, we'll just get caught, and then all his sacrifice will mean nothing. Come on. He half-dragged, half-carried her toward his hidden cabin, tucked deep in the pines, where he quickly barred the door and shoved a rifle into her hands. "Stay low and don't open this door unless you hear my voice," he ordered. Emma clutched the weapon, shaking her head wildly. "I can't just hide while he's out there alone." Jonah's eyes softened, but his tone remained firm. "The best way to help him is to live, girl. Boone wouldn't forgive me if I let you die." Before Emma could argue, the sound of hooves thundered through the trees, and Jonah cursed under his breath. "They're coming." He shoved her toward a trap door hidden beneath a rug. "Down there now." Emma slid into the dark, cramped space, biting her lip to stifle her sobs as Jonah closed the hatch just as the front door burst open. Through the thin cracks, Emma saw boots stomping across the floor and heard Silas's cold, mocking voice. "Where's the girl, Jonah? You can't hide her forever." Jonah's voice was calm but defiant. "Ain't no girl here, Silas. Just me and my gun." Silas chuckled darkly. "You think Boone can save her? He's probably dead already. My men are bringing me his body as we speak." Emma's heart nearly stopped at those words, a scream clawing at her throat, but she bit down hard, tasting blood, refusing to give herself away. Jonah stood his ground. His rifle cocked, while Silas circled like a wolf. "You've got one last chance, old man," Silas sneered. "Hand her over, or I'll burn you out like I did Boone's cabin." Jonah spat at Silas's feet. "You'll get her over my corpse." The room erupted in violence as a gunshot rang out, followed by the crash of furniture and shouts of rage. Emma clamped her hands over her ears, tears streaming down her face as the fight raged above her, every second stretching into an eternity. Then, abruptly, there was silence. Emma's breath caught as heavy boots approached the trap door, and Silas's voice slithered through the darkness like a snake. "Found you," he hissed, yanking the door open. Emma screamed, raising the rifle with shaking hands, but before she could fire, another shot rang out behind Silas, and he staggered forward with a howl. A bloodied, battered Elias stood in the doorway, his storm-gray eyes blazing with fury. "Get away from her!" he growled, leveling his rifle at Silas. Emma sobbed his name, realizing that against all odds, Elias Boone had survived, and now the fight for both their lives was far from over. Elias stood like a phantom in the doorway, his face streaked with soot and blood. His storm-gray eyes locked on Silas as smoke curled from the barrel of his rifle. Silas clutched his bleeding shoulder and snarled, his hatred burning hotter than the fire Elias had barely escaped. Emma scrambled from the trapdoor, throwing herself into Elias's arms, sobbing with relief as she felt the steady thud of his heart beneath his torn coat. "I thought you were dead," she gasped, but Elias gently pushed her behind him, never taking his eyes off Silas. "Not today," he said coldly. "This ends now." Jonah staggered to his feet, battered but alive, retrieving his rifle from where it had fallen during the fight. Silas's men burst into the cabin, their boots pounding across the floor, but they froze at the sight of Elias standing tall despite his wounds, his presence radiating unbreakable will. "You came here for her," Elias said, his voice calm but deadly. "You thought you could own her like property, crush her spirit like you've done to so many others, but you didn't count on someone standing in your way." Silas spat at the ground, sneering through gritted teeth. "You're just one man, Boone. You can't stop me or the men who follow me." Elias shifted his rifle slightly, his tone like iron. "I don't need to stop them all, just you." For a tense heartbeat, silence hung heavy in the smoke-filled room. Then chaos exploded. Silas lunged for Emma, screaming, "She's mine!" But Elias fired, the shot tearing into Silas's leg and dropping him to the floor with a howl of rage. Jonah opened fire, driving Silas's men back through the doorway as bullets splintered the walls. Emma grabbed the pistol Elias had given her and aimed with shaking hands, her fear transforming into fierce determination as she fired at the outlaws trying to swarm inside. The confined space became a maelstrom of noise and smoke, the air thick with gunpowder and screams. Elias fought like a man possessed, his every movement precise and brutal, protecting Emma with his body as he forced Silas's men into retreat. Finally, the last outlaw fled into the night, leaving Silas writhing on the floor, his power broken. Elias loomed over him, breathing hard, his storm-gray eyes like storm clouds ready to break. "You took her freedom, you burned my home, and you spilled innocent blood," he said, his voice shaking with fury. "But you'll never hurt her again." Silas glared up at him, defiant to the end. "Even if you kill me, there'll be others. Men like me will always rise." Elias pressed the barrel of his rifle to Silas's chest, his hand steady. "Then I'll be here to stop them." He didn't pull the trigger. Instead, he struck Silas hard with the rifle butt, knocking him unconscious. Jonah stepped forward, panting, and bound Silas's hands with a length of rope. "We'll take him to town for the law to deal with," Jonah said grimly. Elias turned to Emma, his fierce expression softening as he saw the tears streaming down her face. She threw her arms around his neck, clinging to him as if she'd never let go. "You came back for me?" she whispered, her voice breaking. Elias held her close, his voice rough with emotion. "I told you, Emma, you're free now, and no one will ever take that from you again." As dawn's first light crept through the broken shutters, Elias knew the fight wasn't over. But for this moment, they had won. And Emma's freedom had been bought not with a single silver dollar, but with blood, fire, and unshakable love. The pale light of dawn revealed the wreckage of the night's battle, smoke curling up from the burned-out ruins of Jonah's cabin as the three of them stood in the snow, battered but alive. Elias's coat was torn and blood-stained, his face streaked with grime, Yet his storm-gray eyes were steady as he stared down at the bound and gagged figure of Silas lying unconscious at his feet. Emma clung to his arm, her own body trembling from exhaustion and shock, while Jonah limped beside them, his jaw set with grim determination. "The town needs to see him for what he really is," Elias said, his voice hoarse but unyielding. "No more whispers, no more fear. They need proof that men like Silas can fall." Emma swallowed hard, her voice barely a whisper. "They'll hate me, Elias. They'll think I was part of this." Elias turned to her, cupping her face gently despite the roughness of his hands. "Let them see the truth," he said firmly. "You were the victim, Emma, never the villain. Today we end his hold over you forever." Jonah hitched his rifle over his shoulder and jerked his chin toward the trail leading to town. "Sun's up. Best get moving before his men regroup." They set off, Elias leading the horse that dragged Silas through the snow while Emma rode behind Jonah. Her heart pounding with every step closer to the place where her nightmare had begun. As they entered the town square, the townsfolk emerged from their homes, their murmurs growing into shocked gasps when they saw Silas tied and defeated. Caleb, Emma's stepbrother, pushed through the crowd, his face pale as he stammered. What is this? Elias Boone, you've gone too far." Elias's storm-gray eyes cut through him like a blade. "No, Caleb. You went too far the moment you sold your own sister to pay for your gambling debts." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd as Emma lifted her chin, her voice trembling but clear. "He's telling the truth. Caleb and my stepmother betrayed me, humiliated me, and gave me to this monster." She pointed at Silas, whose muffled curses only added to the scene. Caleb tried to backpedal, his hands raised. "She's lying! She's always been trouble!" But the crowd turned on him, anger flashing in their eyes as neighbors who had once looked away finally saw the depth of his cruelty. Jonah stepped forward, his voice carrying over the murmurs. "We all knew Silas was rotten, but we let fear keep us silent. No more. This ends today." The sheriff, drawn by the commotion, pushed through the crowd and took Silas into custody, his face grim. "He'll stand trial before the circuit judge," the sheriff declared. Caleb tried to flee, but two townsmen seized him, their expressions dark. Emma's knees buckled as relief and exhaustion swept over her, and Elias caught her, holding her against his chest. "It's over now," he murmured, though his gaze swept the crowd warily. "At least for today." Emma looked up at him, tears glistening in her eyes. "You risked everything for me, Elias. Why?" His voice was raw with emotion. "Because no one should ever have to buy their freedom, and because somewhere along the way, saving you became the only thing that mattered." The crowd began to disperse, leaving only the three of them standing amid the ashes of their old lives, and for the first time, Emma felt the weight of her chains lifting. But as she glanced at Elias, she knew their fight for a future was only just beginning. The sun climbed higher over the snow-covered town, melting the last traces of darkness as Elias led Emma away from the square, his arm protectively around her trembling shoulders, while Jonah followed a few steps behind, watchful and weary. The crowd's angry murmurs faded into the distance, replaced by the quiet crunch of boots on packed snow. Emma glanced back once, seeing Caleb being dragged toward the jail alongside Silas, both men shouting empty threats that dissolved into the cold morning air, and for the first time in her life, she felt no fear, only a deep, aching relief. When they reached the edge of town, Elias stopped and turned to face her, his storm-gray eyes softening in a way she had never seen before. "You don't owe anyone here anything," he said, his voice low but steady. "You're free now, Emma. Free to choose where you go, who you become, what kind of life you want to build." Emma's throat tightened as tears welled in her eyes, her hands clutching his torn coat. "The only life I want," she whispered, "is one where you're in it. You gave up everything for me, Elias. Your home, your safety, even your last dollar. You didn't just save me. You showed me what it means to be seen, to matter." Elias's breath caught. And for a moment the fierce, unshakable man seemed vulnerable as he lifted her chin with a calloused hand. "I didn't do it to be a hero," he said softly. "I did it because somewhere along the way, you became my reason to fight." Emma's tears spilled over, and she buried her face against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath the rough fabric of his shirt. Jonah cleared his throat gruffly, looking away to give them a moment of privacy, though a faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Well," he muttered, "now that Silas and his snakes are caged, we've got rebuilding to do." Elias nodded, his protective arm tightening around Emma. "We'll build," he agreed, "but not just a cabin or a ranch. We'll build something worth protecting, a life where no one can ever hurt her again." Emma pulled back slightly, her eyes shining with determination. "I want to help others, Elias. There are more women like me, trapped by men like Silas. Maybe we can give them the same chance you gave me." Elias's chest swelled with pride at her courage. "Then that's what we'll do," he promised. Together they rode back to Jonah's land, where neighbors were already gathering to help rebuild after the night's destruction. As the sun dipped low, casting golden light over the valley, Emma stood beside Elias, watching the walls of a new cabin rise from the ashes. Henry, a small boy who had lost his parents to Silas's schemes, clung to Emma's hand, a living symbol of the future they were creating. Elias knelt beside the boy, ruffling his hair. "You're safe now, son," he said gently. Emma's heart swelled as she saw the vision of the family she'd never dared to dream of taking shape before her eyes. That night, as stars glittered overhead and the crackle of a warm fire filled the air, Elias took Emma's hands in his gaze fierce and tender all at once. "I vowed to keep you safe, and I'll spend the rest of my life keeping that promise," he said. Emma smiled through her tears, leaning into his embrace. "And I vow never to let fear rule me again. Together we'll face whatever comes." As they stood in the glow of the firelight, surrounded by friends and a future born from struggle, Emma knew that her freedom had been bought not just with a single silver dollar, but with the courage, love, and unbreakable bond they had forged through fire and blood. And for the first time, her heart believed in forever.